It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, just me and Aiden, curled up on opposite ends of the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. The living room was dim, the only light flickering from the screen. 2 years had passed since Daniel died, leaving behind silence that never really left this house. I had spent those years holding everything together, never realizing how much time had slipped by, how much he had changed. Aiden sat beside me, casually sprawled out, his arm resting on the back of the couch. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident, relaxed, as though he belonged, as though this space was no longer mine alone. My eyes drifted toward him, and that's when I saw it. The curve of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the calm in his presence. It hit me all at once. He wasn't a boy anymore. I looked away, heart skipping a beat, trying to brush the thought aside. "He's your stepson, Evelyn," I reminded myself, gripping the edge of the blanket like it could anchor me to sanity. But the tension was already there, uninvited and electric. As the movie shifted into a romantic scene, Aiden leaned just slightly closer. I could feel his warmth near my shoulder, his breath faintly brushing my skin. My pulse quickened. For a second, our eyes met, just long enough for me to catch something unfamiliar in his gaze. It wasn't boyish admiration. It was something deeper, something dangerous. And in that quiet space between us, I realized everything ordinary about that night had just started to fall apart. The movie played on, but I wasn't paying attention anymore. I could feel Aiden inching closer, not overtly, not in a way you could call out, but just enough to shift the air between us. His arm, draped behind me on the couch, felt too close. His presence loomed larger than before, and when I turned to glance at him, he was already watching me. There was something in his eyes. Unspoken, unreadable, a flicker of emotion I couldn't place. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things, but my body betrayed me. My skin tingled where his warmth touched it. My breath came a little faster, and when I shifted away, my heart thudded in my chest like a warning I didn't want to hear. "Evelyn," he said, his voice lower than usual, barely louder than a whisper. I turned to him, my mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, Aiden?" I want to thank you," he said, looking directly into my eyes. "After my dad died, you didn't have to be there for me, but you were. You always were." His words hit something soft inside me. I nodded, trying to smile, but I could feel the warmth rising in my chest. Then he added softer, "It's because of you I never felt alone." The way he looked at me then, like I was more than just a memory of stability, left me speechless. I should have pulled back, should have laughed it off, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was no longer sure who needed whom more in that moment, and that terrified me. I wasn't prepared for the way his words would settle into me, warm and aching. Aiden sat beside me, his voice steady but layered with something I couldn't quite name. "After my dad passed," he said, "this house felt like a shell, but because of you, I never felt alone." I blinked, unsure how to respond. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching, as though he had rehearsed this in his head for days. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just raw sincerity. I opened my mouth to speak, but all I could offer was a shaky, "Of course, Aiden. I'm glad you were never alone." He didn't look away. "You gave me something no one else did. Comfort, safety. You held everything together when I couldn't even hold myself." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of emotion, of something swelling beneath the surface. I could feel it pressing against the fragile boundaries we had kept intact for years. "You mean a lot to me, Evelyn," he added, almost in a whisper. My throat tightened. I had been so focused on surviving grief, I hadn't realized how deeply I had become a part of his healing. And now, here he was, no longer the boy who needed a mother figure, but a young man who saw me as something more. I nodded again, smiling through the storm building inside me. But the truth was, His words had touched a part of me I thought had long gone silent. And suddenly, I was afraid it had just awakened. The days that followed weren't the same. Aiden had changed, subtly at first. At breakfast, he talked more. His voice light, but his eyes constantly on me. Not in the casual way a stepson looks at his mother figure, but in a way that lingered. Watched. Noticed. One morning I was sweeping the floor when he appeared beside me. "Let me do that," he said, gently taking the broom from my hands. I blinked in surprise. Aiden had never once offered to help around the house. "You do everything here," he added, his eyes steady on mine. "You're just one woman. Someone should be taking care of you." I managed a soft "thank you," but my voice betrayed me, a small tremble I couldn't hide. His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I didn't know was still waiting to be seen. Later that day, I felt his gaze on my back while I stood at the kitchen counter chopping vegetables. I turned, and sure enough, he was there, leaning against the doorway, arms folded, eyes fixed on me. But these weren't the eyes of a boy. They traced me in silence. My hair, the curve of my waist, the rhythm of my movements. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was reading into things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew. His attention had weight now. And worse, I didn't want it to stop. I came home that evening expecting nothing more than a quiet birthday. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze. Candles lit every corner of the room, casting a golden glow that flickered across the walls. The table was set for two. Crystal wine glasses, fresh flowers, soft music playing in the background. It felt like walking into a dream. Or something far more intimate. Then Aiden stepped out from the hallway. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers. Polished, handsome. I barely recognized him. His usual casual charm had transformed into something magnetic, something that made my breath catch. "I wanted to make tonight special," he said, smiling softly. He handed me a box. Inside was a red dress, bold, elegant, the kind of fabric that promised to cling and reveal. I stared at it, speechless. "You bought this? For me?" I asked. "It's your birthday," he said, his voice calm, gaze unflinching. "You deserve to feel beautiful." I took the dress to my room, fingers trembling as I slipped it on. The fabric hugged every curve, the deep slit exposing just enough to make me feel bare and alive at the same time. I hadn't worn something like this in years. And suddenly, I didn't feel 40-something. I felt seen. When I came back down, Aiden's eyes met mine, and didn't move. His stare was reverent, full of something I wasn't ready to name. "You look absolutely stunning," he whispered, and I believed him. Even though everything in me warned this was more than just a birthday dinner, I still took my seat across from him. The wine had begun to settle in, warm and sweet on my tongue, but it wasn't the alcohol that made my head spin. It was the way Aiden looked at me across the candlelit table, like I was someone he'd never truly seen until now. We talked at first about Daniel, about memories and how much had changed. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the conversation shifted. "Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "how can a woman like you be alone?" I looked up, caught off guard by the intensity in his tone. "Loneliness doesn't always ask permission," I replied, trying to deflect. "Sometimes life just leaves you that way." "But it shouldn't," he said, eyes fixed on mine. "A woman like you, beautiful, strong, you deserve more than just memories and silence." I didn't know how to respond. My fingers toyed with the stem of the wine glass, but I couldn't look away from him. "You're not just my stepmom," he continued, his voice softer now. "You're so much more than that." The words hit deeper than I expected, cutting through years of buried emotions. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, intimate, dangerous. Then he stood, slowly, and walked around the table. My heart pounded as he came to my side, resting a hand gently on the table's edge beside me. "You shouldn't have to go through life being unseen," he said, leaning closer. No one should overlook a woman like you. And in that suspended moment, the world seemed to narrow down to just the space between us. Charged, forbidden, and impossible to ignore. He stood so close I could feel the heat radiating off him, his eyes locked onto mine with a fire I hadn't seen before. My breath hitched as his fingers brushed the edge of the table, inching nearer. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." Before I could speak, before I could make sense of the chaos building inside me, his lips met mine. It was gentle at first, hesitant, as if asking permission. But it didn't stay that way. There was a hunger beneath it, a connection we had both tried to ignore for too long. And in that moment, I didn't resist. My hands didn't push him away. My lips responded, just enough to make time feel like it stopped. The world faded. The candlelight, the music, the weight of the past, it all vanished as I sank into something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Desire, attention, longing. But then reality came crashing in. I gasped softly, pulling back. My fingers grazed his chest as if to steady myself. This isn't right, I breathed, my voice trembling. I need to go to my room. His expression didn't change. No regret, just raw, quiet honesty in his eyes. I'm sorry, Evelyn, but I couldn't stop myself. Without another word, I turned and walked away, legs unsteady, heart racing, lips still tingling from the kiss I never saw coming. Behind my bedroom door, I stood in silence, trying to calm the storm inside me. But deep down, I knew something had already shifted, and there was no turning back. The house had gone still. I lay in bed, heart still thudding from earlier, trying to convince myself the night would end quietly. But then, I heard it. A soft creak at the door. My eyes snapped open, and in the dim light, I saw him. Aiden, standing in the doorway, his silhouette outlined in silence. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice low, trembling but steady. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I can't stay away." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The room shrank around us, the air charged and heavy. My heart pounded, not with fear, but something far more dangerous. I sat up slowly, the blankets falling from my shoulders. "Aiden," I breathed, my voice barely audible. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said, eyes dark with emotion. "And I had to know if you felt it too." I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked, and every part of me ached. For connection, for warmth, for the truth I had been too afraid to admit. "I do," I finally said, my voice cracking under the weight of it. "I feel the same." His eyes widened just enough to betray the storm behind them. Surprise, relief, longing. A slow smile curled at the corner of his lips, and with each step toward me, the walls I'd built over the years collapsed. He knelt at the edge of the bed, his hand brushing mine. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. For the first time in years, I stopped pretending. And in that quiet, trembling moment, everything we'd been holding back broke loose. I whispered the words before I could stop myself. "I want you." Aiden's breath caught in his throat, his eyes locked on mine, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then, with a sudden urgency, he stepped forward, and our lips met again. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt, just need. His hand slid around my waist, pulling me closer, anchoring me to the moment as everything else melted away. The past, the boundaries, the guilt, none of it mattered. Not now. His kiss deepened, full of fire and desperation, and I felt myself unravel in his arms. My fingers moved to the straps of my dress, slowly slipping them off my shoulders. The fabric whispered down my body and pooled at my feet. I stood there, bare under his gaze, heart racing as his eyes traveled over me. Not with shock, but reverence, like he had waited a lifetime for this. Without a word, Aiden pulled off his shirt and joined me on the bed. His hands, warm and firm, explored every inch of me with aching tenderness. We moved together like a secret finally spoken aloud, our bodies entwined in a rhythm that felt both new and impossibly familiar. Years of loneliness poured out between our breaths. Every touch was a confession, every sigh a release. As I clutched the sheets, his name escaped my lips in a soft, broken whisper. And when it was over, when the room was still and our skin slick with warmth, he lay beside me, breathless, his hand finding mine. In that moment, wrapped in him, I felt more alive than I had in years. But I also knew we had just stepped into something we could never undo. The morning light hadn't yet crept through the curtains, but I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with the weight of what had just happened. Aiden lay beside me, breath steady, one arm resting across my waist like it belonged there. And maybe in that moment, it did. I traced the memory of the night in my mind. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every breathless second of surrender. It hadn't just been passion. It hadn't just been two bodies giving in. It was something far more dangerous. It was real. Lying there, I knew something inside me had shifted. The woman I'd been for years, the grieving widow, the silent homemaker, the protector, she had stepped aside to make room for someone I hadn't known still existed. A woman who felt seen, desired, alive. This wasn't a reckless mistake. It wasn't even about defying roles or breaking rules. It was a collision of need, timing, and emotion that had been waiting too long to surface. I looked at Aiden, peaceful, content, and wondered if he realized how much had changed, not just between us, but within me. Because there, in the stillness after the storm, I knew last night wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something uncharted, unspoken, and impossible to ignore. But where do we go from here? That's the question that lingered as I watched Aiden sleep beside me, his hand still gently curled around mine. What we shared wasn't something I could take back, and deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Yet the weight of what it meant, of what it could become, pressed heavy on my chest. The world outside that bedroom hadn't changed, but mine had. Our secret now lived between heartbeats, between glances, between every unspoken word we'd yet to say. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if this is a beautiful mistake or the beginning of something neither of us saw coming. But one thing is certain. This story isn't over. And if you think last night was where the line ends, you have no idea where it leads next. Stay with me. You'll want to hear what happens after the door closes again.